Okay, so I'll continue responding to comments, and I apologise if I miss anyone, because sorry about the busy road, by the way. Hopefully it's not too noisy. I find it really difficult to navigate YouTube. Comments appear in the little notification thing, and then they appear in a kind of random order, so I don't quite sometimes I don't quite catch comments when they come up, and I'm not pretty good at YouTube, so I apologise if I miss anyone or I'm not responding to someone that I said I'd respond to, but you can remind me in the comments if you like, and I will try my best to get around to it. So, also my eyesight's terrible. Erin, E-L-L-E, posted a comment and said, I feel like the recognition comes in waves for me, and my mind comes back to be more distracting. It's like my subconscious mind wants to bring up unresolved ideas and patterns to be released, but it can be difficult to deal with as they are so emotionally charged. Then I get lost in them again, and then I'll bring my awareness back again, and then we'll see. So there is this back and forth that seems to oscillate, where it feels like we are distancing ourselves from the thoughts. We can observe the thoughts, let's see, with more space and less attachment. And when we do that, we're kind of creating some space, creating some distance. Between the thoughts and that which observes, or that which seems to observe the thoughts. And this is where when I went through this, I wouldn't have put it in these words. I didn't describe it like this, but it kind of clarified after a while, where I described it in a video I put up called Presence. I think it was called Presence and Absence of Thought, where I kind of described my experience with the back and forth, the kind of getting lost in the dreamlike quality of identification with a thought narrative, and then that remembering, something remembers, or you remember that, or notices that you've been drawn away into this narrative, and there's this kind of sleepy, half awake quality to it, this distance from immediate sensory experience, and this kind of closed in quality, and then there's that snapping out of it, and then the back into it, snapping out of it. That, at least for me, that didn't tend to, that there was a resistance in there to the thoughts. There was a battle with the thoughts. There was a me battling this thought narrative, resisting this thought narrative, that made that back and forth feel very frustrating, feel very much like a losing battle, feel very much like a struggle. I didn't realise, this is where language is going to trip me up, I didn't realise that in that stepping back and recognising that thought narrative, that same function of the thinker relating to thoughts, I was stepping back straight into that again. There was something there that recognised what was happening, but that was quickly recaptured by the mind, recaptured by the thinker, the one who relates to experience. You could kind of say it came in the back door and took over, and it was this constant losing battle of going back, getting lost, going back, getting lost. And I'll try and describe this, but take it with a pinch of salt, because this is my experience, and this understood as a concept doesn't do any good. This noticed in experience in real time is what breaks that pattern of the thinker, the one who relates to experience, my thoughts, my awakening. And that's the noticing. I'll talk from my own experience. I noticed that, or something noticed, that the base thought from which all these thought narratives sprung, the base assumption, the basic premise that was almost built into every thought, was the assumption, the idea that I am the one thinking. This is my narrative. I am the thinker. The one thinking was built into every thought. And then when I stepped back out of that narrative and said, oh, I was lost in thought, I was stepping straight back into the one who relates to thoughts. It's so much more simple than that. It's that kind of trap isn't completely broken. That kind of identification isn't completely, let's say, seen through, until it becomes clear that the thinker, the me that relates to experience, the one having the experience, the one thinking the thoughts, the one trying to resist, trying not to think, trying to get away from the thoughts, is itself another thought, but a very sneaky one, because it's subtle, it's suggested in the thought narrative. Any thought that appears that talks about my experience, it talks about the experience as the objective content of the thought narrative, but in doing that, it assumes the reality of the thinker. It assumes the reality of the subject that relates to experience. It's a sneaky one, and that function will continue until it's seen that that's just another thought. There are times when that's simply not there. It's not needed. Yet this experience, this, whatever this is, continues. Whatever knows the thoughts continues. But the mind narrative self pretends to be the knower as the thinker, if that makes sense. I don't know if I'm making that sound very complicated, but it's stepping back into the knowing of, the noticing of, the awareness of, without analysis and without resistance. That need to relate, that need to understand, that need to contextualize, and that need to resist. There's an emotion tone to it, there's a feeling tone to it, and that feeling tone very much directs the whole narrative. And in your comment, I think you said something about the subconscious, the emotions. Looking at that without analysis, without the need to relate to and understand, but just simply experiencing that for what it is as it appears in the moment, without clinging on. Notice and release, notice and release. If that makes sense. And it will become... There's almost like a contrast there in the beginning, and a feeling, energetic feeling tone of the one who relates to. There's an energy behind it. There's a need to know, need to understand, need to finalize, need to get rid of. Feeling tone to it and energy to it. And the contrast to that is the that knowingness that is you, that knowingness that across the entire spectrum of your experience now, the thoughts that arise, the thoughts that appear, the sensations, that knowingness knows infinitely, and it doesn't need to grasp anything. It's already complete, it's already free, it's already released. And then when you said the recognition, that recognition, if you can feel it, if you can feel what that, almost what the qualities of that feel like, then you can orient yourself towards that. You can become familiar with the familiarity of that. It might not feel familiar in the beginning, because what might be more familiar is that energy of the thinker, that energy of the one that relates, and it just happens automatically. It just appears automatically, and it almost kind of entices you into its identification, into its narrative, and it will just continue doing that. But it's kind of like a dilation out into just the pure knowingness itself that resists nothing, that doesn't need to understand because it's already understood, that doesn't need to get it because it's already got, that doesn't need to resist because all resistance appears within it, not separate from it and as it. So getting in touch with that quality of the knowingness, the stillness, the presence, the just isness, and noticing what is a thought and what isn't a thought. Good, the knowingness isn't a thought, but the one that needs to know is a thought, the one that needs to relate to experience, or the one that needs to get something or understand something or resist something, or get away from a thought narrative, is itself a thought. Anyway, we'll move on here. So I think this says Ralph, Nimbin, with a picture of I think that's Wallace and Gromit. Where was I here? I've just lost it now. Fantastic. So he says, one of the big hurdles getting into this is doubt. Both of the message and the presenter. So much of this stuff is monetized, which fuels conviction that it's all a scam. The value in what you're doing, David, is that it's obviously genuine. Speakers like you have given me the confidence that it's worth sticking with the practice, and I thank you for that. Taken in that context, your pointers are actually really powerful. Much appreciation. So yeah, words can't describe how real this is. You could almost say this is the most real thing there is. And that was my experience as well. There was something in me that knew, that resonated with this, but there was always doubt that came in and covered it up, and it was speculation, judgment, not sure. Is it this or is it that? That kind of doubt, just uncertainty. But I can tell you sincerely that, how could I explain? So take your hand, put your hand up in front of you, and then look at it, and then touch it, and there's something there. This is an experience. There's something there. You touch it, there is sensation. There is a hand. It might be mysterious as to what is that. There might be some mystery in it, but the very fact that this is, that this sensation is, that you are seeming to experience this, that it's a hand, that it's a thing here, that's how certain this recognition is. It's entirely beyond doubt. It's entirely doubtless. It's not this or that. It's not, is it not? I'm not sure. It's entirely doubtless. It's the most real thing that you'll ever come in contact with. It's more, it's so real that you can't even say that it's real, because the certainty of this goes so much further beyond the concept of real and unreal, to the point where you can't even categorize it. And there was a period of doubt and struggle and uncertainty for me, but once this recognition clarified, it's not even a question anymore. It's I'm not telling you this because I want to convince you that it's awakening is a thing, that it happens or whatever. I would encourage the only way to find this out is to get in touch with this in your own experience, and then you'll know, and then there's no doubt anymore. It's hard to describe the certainty of this. It's hard to describe the lack of a need to confirm this, the lack of a need to prove this or impose this as a view on someone else or prove it to yourself. It's beyond all that, and it's entirely accessible infinitely right now. And you don't need to believe anything about it. That's the thing. It doesn't require belief. All it requires is to get in touch with this in your own experience, and it's right here. It's right here. Okay, so I've just lost it again. It's finished. Right, so this is a massive. This is a massive one. Okay. Right, so I'm not going to read this whole thing. I'm just going to summarize. This is from one party, ROULE. Yeah, so this person said, right, I'll go for the first one. At the moment, I don't feel like awareness is done by me. I feel like the attention is done by me. I can't seem to get rid of the feeling of being an agent within something more than me, more than the agent. I feel like the experience is a particular piece of existence rather than the experience of all existence. So I posted a comment trying to clarify if the something more than me was the direct experience, let's say, or the direct contact with or experience of what I'm always trying to point to on this channel. And then it continues. So the basic premise of this here is is doership, is attachment to outcomes, is agency. The one who experience belongs to, the decision maker, the one who relates to experience, the one who has thoughts. I'll read this bit. So I have moments when the sense of myself that takes the role of an agent relaxes because nothing is provoking it. But I don't know it's correct to say it doesn't exist in those moments. It's just like releasing and letting go of this role for the moment. Does that make sense? Yeah. There's a strong desire to want to rid myself of psychological suffering and a lot of resistance compounding the suffering and a lot of frustration. So the same as the first question comment here, is that the key to this is seeing that the thinker, the one who owns experience, the one who relates to experience, the me here having an experience separate to the totality of existence, the totality of being, is but another transient thought. And it's not there all the time, but it will suggest that it is there all the time. It will create the illusion of an autonomous entity who owns thoughts, owns this experience, at the centre of experience, going around relating to the world as a separate thing, relating to thoughts in this internal world, an internal world that is very much real, that very much dictates a causal relationship between my thoughts and my actions and what's going on in the world. And you described the thinning of that for periods, but the uncertainty as to whether it was not present at that point in time. Again, I think the key to this is to see or to feel, what does the me feel like? Where is the me in the thoughts as they come up? Where is the me? Who or what am I that's thinking these thoughts? We get into the root of what I am that feels like me, that thinks and relates to the world, that has an internal world that talks about my experience. And it seems like such a real thing. It seems like it's a real thing. It's a real agent, a real autonomous agent that has its own internal world. It's struggling against the whatever this is as a separate thing within it. But if you look for that in the thought, look for that in the thought, and you might see that if you can create that, let's say, distance from thought, so you kind of distancing yourself from thought such that you're not entirely enthralled in the content, the narrative, the story. You might notice that I am thinking, okay, I'm thinking, what will be the next thought? And then just wait. Now you're attentive, you're watching for what will the next thought be. Something's watching. Might be something that feels like me. And then the next thought pops up in whatever form it comes in, and just see, where is the me in that thought? Where is the one that thinks, the one that relates, the one that owns that thought in the thought? And it's strange because it's suggested in the thought itself. It's suggested to be a real thing. So for example, I'm going to drive home after filming this video. So I'm going to drive. In that, there's the whole narrative of me having something to do, driving home, Where is the real me in that thought? It's suggested, it's built into the thought. It is itself the thought. There's no thing called me other than an imagination. But when I say that, right, what happens to your mind? Does it start to go, well, I need to figure this out, wait a minute, and then it will start saying, yes, but and it'll defend itself. It'll start making a case for its own reality, especially when you get close to seeing it for what it is. It'll make its case for its own reality. Just stop, go back, watch for thought. What comes up? Another thought trying to make a case for itself as a real thing. What's doing that? What is it that's doing that? See if it's anything other than thought. See if there's a real me there, that when you look for it, you can find it. Is there a real me here? What's primary to all that? What are you that knows all that? What are you that's behind the entire thing? When you zoom out, what are you that knows this entire experience of trying to find the me that's relating to thought? I can't describe what that is. You kind of have to look for yourself. But it requires attentiveness. It kind of feels like an effort. You kind of have to be relentless with it for a while and really look. Whenever something comes up, is that a thought? Is there a me suggested in that thought? Don't analyse it, just look. When you notice, release it, let go, and come back to this. Because you're always here. You're not going to find something. You're looking from it. You are it. You're looking for yourself. If you can find yourself suggested in a thought, is that real? What's more real than that? Just self-inquiry. Look for the next thought. Notice it. If I notice myself suggested in a thought, where is that? Can I find it? Look for the next thought. What's always here behind all that? Or what are you that's always here behind all that? It's so simple. It's so simple. That's why it's tricky. Because the mind's used to creating complexities, creating conclusions. You're never going to find the conclusion with this. There's no conclusion to this. It's an ongoingness. Infinitely. It's not going to be satisfying for the mind, but it's here. It's you. It always is. And you never really find it. That's the weird thing about it. You never really find. I'm not going to say that I found the ultimate self and now I know that, because it's just not like that. That's the mind taking credit for what is. But you can notice it's almost like when you're looking from this suggestion of me, you're looking out, it's very uncertain, it's very uncomfortable. It can be uncomfortable, like you said about the suffering, but when you take a step back and you look at that, rather than looking through it, and you keep doing that, and you keep doing that, and you keep doing it, this suggested entity that's, let's say, suggested in, made of thought, that doesn't actually exist, becomes less real, and then something more real comes in, and it's indescribable, but people describe it as a knowingness, I amness, isness, thisness, awareness, presence, so on and so on. All different words to describe something that's indescribable, but it certainly knows. What you think you are, that's knowing, that's understanding, isn't you. It's it's an assumption that leads into a thought, that leads into another thought, that assumes, and it's just a habit that happens on its own. And then when you see it happening on its own, it loses its power, because it just invalidates the whole thing. And then what is obvious? What is obvious? That's been here the whole time. What is obvious? That's been here the whole time. And like I always say, it's getting in touch with the feeling. What does it feel like to try and get in, grasp this? What is it, this or is it that? What is this thoughts coming? And then that energy, feel that. What does that feel like? And then take a step back. That's why I was trying to decipher whether or not that you, I don't know if you do or not, but whether you're not or not you had the experience of, like you said, the something bigger. I thought that was you describing what I'm talking about, maybe. And clearly part of you knows it because you're here watching this. Get in touch with that, find out what that is. What is it in you that's drawing you to this? There's something there. Waking up. Get in touch with that. And I say many times, it's simple. It's so simple. And when you see it, let's say, it's kind of laughable. it's kind of funny, and it's a massive relief. Because all that struggle, all that trying to figure it out, always just appeared in you, which is here anyway. It can seem complicated. It ever starts to seem complicated, just release. Notice, okay, this is confusing, this is complicated. Release. Simple. Very, very simple. Probably the most simple thing. I think I might be running out of time. Someone asked me if I was on drugs, and someone also asked me if I was a robot. So I've never had that one before. There was another one here. Sorry guys, I'm not very good at this. Right, okay. So Ben asked me, might have to do this in a separate one. It's a very long one as well, so Ben is interested to know if it feels to me like after recognition of no self that there is a whole new process that can begin to happen, integration of emptiness or no self with the individual. So he's basically talking about that non-duality includes a dualistic and relative world. Yeah. You're getting stuck in a conceptualizing non-duality to the point where it had started to become a belief system. Yeah. So this is common. So Ben had a shift, an awakening. And I remember talking to you at that point, and I remember you saying it's so simple, I think, or something like, how could I have missed this? And if you remember back to that, I know that would just be a memory, but how simple it was, how much of a relief it was that you didn't need to do anything, you didn't need to figure anything out, you didn't need to find anything, it was already here. It was already here the whole time. What a relief. But then what happens is, over time, the identity shifts. Check my battery here. The identity, the conceptual identity, the mind-based, self, it takes a massive hit. The thinker is, you see what this thinker is, just the thought. There's nothing to it. It comes and goes. That's not me. But you still don't know what you are. But it's fucking obvious. You're here. You're looking from it. It's so simple. But what happens is the thinker, it reconfigures itself into a different context and tries to kind of come back online in a different way. It's very strange that way, and it adopts new beliefs and concepts and stuff, and it tries to recomplicate that whole non-dual recognition. and it can get tricky again. It can recomplexify experience to the point where it seems confusing again. And I think that's what you were describing when you said that you become stuck to, or it was turning into a belief. I'll just. You seem like you're pretty clear from what you're saying, but I'll describe my own experience. So after the initial recognition, the mind self, the belief in that, the identification with that was shattered. But what happened is that because that narrative wasn't there holding all of experience together, giving it context, it opened up a whole new level of narrative that was very emotions based, very energetic. So I've tried to describe this before. I've not heard anyone talking about this, so it might be a bit bizarre, but when when you hear a song or taste a taste, and it gives you a visceral, emotional, energetic flavour and memory of a time in your life, you hear a song and it reminds me of that time, but beyond the specifics of the content objectively in that memory, there's an emotion tone, a flavour, like a feeling behind that, and in that feeling there's more certainty than the specifics of the memory and thought. The feeling is more clear, or more certain, more visceral. You feel it, and it's full, it's whole. This after the initial awakening, this gave me access to this whole emotional landscape that I could experience in the senses. So I looked at any image, any sight, a tree, and it would give me what felt like an emotional flavour of a memory, an emotional, visceral memory experience everywhere, and I got lost in this experience, this level of consciousness, let's say, that I had never experienced before. And these weren't particularly memories from this lifetime. I know that sounds stupid, and it was everywhere, and I was just like going around tasting this taste, experiencing these emotional flavours. After a while, I started to realise that these emotional, there was a narrative built into that, a suggested reality built into that. I called it the emotional flavour of the witness, that had its own suggested reality, that had its own narrative quality. And I realised that even with the clear non-dual recognition, it was still there, it was still moving, it was still changing around, directing this kind of subtle narrative of experience, this subtle presence of something here. And it was non-dual in nature, so it's not specifically happening in the body. It was like symbiotically happening in the body and here, and like thoughts, in the same way that thoughts were projected onto the world to make it look a certain way. And there was a reality to that, there was a reification of that, on some level, on some visceral, physical, universal level. And it's only recently that has started to lose its reality, to lose its suggested, I can't even describe it. To lose its suggested reality. it was almost like an attachment to the in a strange way, an attachment to something that had its own inherent reality that existed through and in and beyond, in a timeless way, this experience as a totality. And that was a very, very subtle attachment to spot, and it was more captivating, more intoxicating, more powerful than the individual mind, the individual thought narrative, because it was so deep. And it turns out that it seemed to be in, I can't describe it, it seemed to be in some way linked to emotions. And there was a seeking of that, there was a trying to find that, but because there was no thought narrative that could pretend that it could understand it, it was just going through experience and trying to experience that. There was not so much, maybe in a little bit of a seeking way, but in a curious interesting kind of way. And the more I tried to find that as an experience, the less and less potent it became, to the point where it's almost not there anymore. But as it diminishes in its intensity, there's a lightness that comes, and it feels viscerally in the body. Everything just becomes more and more free, more and more light, more and more spontaneous. But anyway, that's a tangent. But that's just trying to describe my own experience with an attachment that appears on a different level, and it's much more driven by emotion rather than trying to figure it out. But what I think happened to me is that the thoughts came in to try and contextualize and figure that out, try and cover it up, trying to understand and control it and reify it into something like a tangible self. But at that point, it was clear that was nonsense. It was clear that wasn't something that was possible. And see if you can relate to that. See if that sounds similar to what you're describing there. It probably makes no sense, but so at a certain point, it becomes much more energetic, much more about emotion, much less about thought and understanding, and much more about experiencing and moving with and through this as it presents itself immediately. And it can seem complicated again, but it's not. It's very simple. It's always very simple. See if there's any conflict there, see if there's any urgency there, see if there's any contraction there, and if there is, just release it and just go with the flow. After that initial awakening, it's easy to recognize that. It's easy for that to be clear when it comes up. And then you just continue clarifying at a deeper and deeper level. And like you've just experienced me trying to describe something ridiculous that makes no sense, the deeper and deeper it goes, the less you're going to be able to even attempt to understand or describe it. But you don't need to. And when you do it, it makes no sense. Anyway, I'm running out of time. That'll do for now. I'll get around to the other ones soon, but I'll talk to you next time.